There is a series of children's books written by a very devout atheist, if I could use that term, by the name of Pullman. His books have won several literary awards in England and have been well received by critics here in the United States. He specializes in children's writings, and especially in his Golden Compass trilogy, 1,100 pages of adventure, excitement, and vivid imagination. The story, like many fantasies written for children, is set in a magical world, a parallel universe to ours that interacts with ours but is quite different. A little girl, Lyra, 12 years old, lives in Oxford. And she has a demon, not a damned soul of hell or a devil, but a demon that accompanies her, as all children in this parallel universe do, and indeed as all people in the parallel universe have. And the demons are like a personification of the individual soul. And in the children's version of the demon, it keeps changing. It might be a moth, it might be a cat, it could be a lion or a tiger. It's constantly changing, and it gives advice to the child. These demons are a part of the psyche of the individual. And when the individual dies, these demons die with them. Or if the demon is killed, the person will die. Given this very intriguing literary device, the little girl goes on a great adventure. There are evil gobblers who are mysteriously stealing children and taking them to the North Pole, where there are armored polar bears set for war, guarding them, and involved in this evil gobbler empire. However, there's also a great suspicion of the authority, and practically any authority. The little girl learns to distrust all adults, to think for herself, but she herself can be deceptive and deceitful. In this great adventure, she meets Mrs. Coulter, a woman of great beauty and femininity. And at first she's intrigued by this woman, but eventually realizes she is part of the enemy camp. And in this adventure, the writer has some passages that really are quite lyrical and beautiful. Others, in my opinion, are rather flat and boring. But isn't that the truth for all novels? As a hack writer myself, I'd be delighted just to get one or two lyrical passages in once in a while. And so this story draws the reader into this alternate universe, and by and large keeps the pages turning, especially in the first volume. Pullman, however, can't resist the temptation to be preachy. Now, I'm a preacher. I make no bones about preaching. That's what I do. But an author, when they become preachy, they know the story comes to a dead halt. So being a preacher in a story is a way to kill the momentum of the story. And especially starting in Volume 2 of the trilogy and Volume 3, he gives in to that temptation. The second volume slows down quite a bit with the introduction of a new universe, ours, and a new character, Will. He doesn't have a demon. He doesn't have any of those magical, wondrous elements around him. The story begins to pick up halfway through the second volume when he meets up with Lyra. The two universes intersect, and they're able to travel back and forth between one and the other on this great adventure. But the preachiness comes in when an ex-nun explains that Christianity is a very powerful but very erroneous idea. We have all types of subtle and direct attacks on Christianity. God is portrayed as the tyrant, and God is named as the Creator, Adonai, and Yahweh, very sacred names to both Jews and Christians. And the author reveals through angels in the story that really God's a sham and was simply the first angel that popped up out of the dust, the equivalent to the Star Wars Force in the trilogy, and claimed these titles as his own, but they were a lie. This false substitute for God. Actually, this God is portrayed in the series as more like the Greek demiurge, or perhaps the devil himself. However, it certainly would be alarming to any religiously oriented person. Now, do I say that people should not have their children read these books? Not at all. But if a believing parent buys the books for the children, they've got to do a lot of homework. They've got to read the books themselves, first of all, and then discuss them with their children. And to talk over all of the elements. Ask the children what they like about the books, what they dislike about the books. And if the children don't bring up the religious elements, ultimately, the parents could say, what do you think about this passage or that? Do you really think God is evil and that we should rebel against God? Do you know what the word Yahweh means and how sacred and holy it is and was and will be to the Jewish people and to the Christians as well? Do you know what Adonai means? Do you know what worshiping and honoring the Creator is all about? And it's important that parents talk about these subjects when their children are in grade school, because throughout their lives they're going to hear repeated over and over again all that's wrong with religion, all that's wrong with faith, all that's wrong with authority. And it's in my opinion that it's when children are still in their formative years that they actually listen to their parents. And to be forewarned is to be forearmed. And if you discuss these things when a child is 9, 10, or 11 years old, it prepares them for life. They will hear the story about how corrupt Christianity is, how corrupt Catholicism is. They'll hear the story about religious wars and inquisitions. They'll hear the stories about oppression of ideas. Everything that has been wrong in the history of religion, they will have repeated over and over to them in a great number of ways, from pop culture to schools to universities. What they won't hear, unless they hear it from their parents and their loved ones, is the story of the martyrs and the saints. The stories of heroic charity, which are a part of Christianity, and it is at its heart. They won't hear about the great scientific discoveries made by believers throughout history. They won't come to know the idea of a university which sprung up in the West out of religious congregations and orders. They won't learn about how the monks saved Western civilization and ancient writings and documents that would have been lost to humanity, except for their lifelong dedication of copying one manuscript after another. They won't learn about the progress made in agriculture and architecture that came up out of the believing community that built great cathedrals and monuments honoring the living and the loving God. So if you buy the Golden Compass trilogy, I urge you to read it first, to talk it over with your children, and to prepare them for a lifetime of informed, intelligent faith. May God bless you and your children on your great pilgrimage, your great journey with God and back to God.